I'm Victor, 31 years old, and I still remember the exact moment my cousin Jackson's face transformed from mockery to shock. Standing in the marble lobby of my own building, he sneered, "Who let him in? He's like mold, keeps coming back." 8 years away had transformed me from the family disappointment to the owner of the very penthouse they were trying to enter. They couldn't understand why security rushed over, not to remove me, but to escort them out. Success is the sweetest revenge when served unexpectedly. Before I tell you how this satisfying moment came to be, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want more stories about sweet, well-deserved comeuppance. Growing up in Millfield, Ohio wasn't easy when your last name was Hamilton, but you lived on the wrong side of town. My father worked as an auto mechanic while most of my extended family lived in mansions and drove the luxury cars he fixed. The divide began when my mother, Elizabeth Hamilton, fell in love with my father, James Carter, a man the family considered beneath their social standing. They called it marrying down, but she called it following her heart. My Uncle Robert and Aunt Diana, Jackson's parents, were particularly vocal about their disapproval. They lived in a sprawling estate at the edge of town with Jackson and his sister Amanda. While we struggled to make ends meet in our modest three-bedroom house, they vacationed in Europe and threw lavish parties my family was rarely invited to. Those Carters, they would say, when they thought no one was listening, always expecting handouts from the family while bringing nothing to the table. Nothing could be further from the truth. My father never asked for anything from the Hamiltons. He worked 12-hour days at his shop, sometimes 7 days a week, to provide for us and to ensure I had opportunities he never had. He would come home with grease still under his fingernails despite scrubbing them clean, his back aching from bending over engines all day. Victor, he would tell me while we tinkered with old radios in our garage, "Never let anyone make you feel small. Your worth isn't in your wallet but in your character." Mom would reinforce these lessons, though I could sometimes catch the hurt in her eyes when her invitations to family functions were accidentally lost in the mail, or when her siblings would abruptly change the subject when she approached at the rare events we did attend. The worst of it came during holiday gatherings at my grandfather William's estate. Grandfather wasn't outright cruel like some others, but his silence was its own form of disapproval. He would give Jackson and his cousins expensive gifts, while I received impersonal gift cards with significantly smaller amounts. The distinction was clear. I was tolerated, not embraced. Jackson never let me forget my place. During one Thanksgiving when I was 15, he cornered me in the kitchen. "You know you're only here because grandfather feels obligated, right?" he whispered, glancing at my second-hand clothes. "Real Hamiltons have standards to uphold." Despite this constant undercurrent of rejection, my parents created a warm, loving home. Dad taught me everything about cars, business ethics, and the value of hard work. Mom instilled in me a love of reading and technology, often bringing home discarded computers from her clerical job for me to disassemble and rebuild. Then came the accident. I was 19, home from my first year at community college. A drunk driver crossed the center line on a rainy night. Both my parents died instantly. The funeral was a blur of faces, some genuinely sympathetic, others merely performing the expected social obligations. Uncle Robert approached me at the reception. "We've discussed it, and we can offer you $1,000 to help with immediate expenses," he said, as if granting a great favor. "After that, you'll need to figure things out. You're an adult now. No offer to stay with them. No genuine support. Just a check that barely covered a month's rent, handed over with the clear expectation that my connection to the family was effectively severed." Jackson stood behind his father, a barely concealed smirk on his face. That night, alone in the house that no longer felt like home, I made a decision. I would leave Millfield. I would succeed on my own terms. And someday I would return on my own terms too. I sold most of our possessions, keeping only photographs and a few mementos. The house went next, though the real estate market crash meant I walked away with far less than it was worth. With nothing holding me back, I purchased a one-way bus ticket to New York City, where opportunity and anonymity awaited in equal measure. As the bus pulled away from Millfield, I didn't look back. I was 19, grief-stricken, alone, but fiercely determined. I had no idea what awaited me, but I knew whatever life I built would be mine alone. No family name to help me, but also no family expectations to constrain me. New York City swallowed me whole. The bustling streets of Manhattan were a far cry from the quiet neighborhoods of Millfield. My first apartment was a fifth-floor walk-up in Brooklyn with 3 roommates I found on Craigslist. Damon, a struggling actor; Jessie, a barista with aspirations of opening her own coffee shop; and Tyler, a night security guard studying computer science. The 4 of us shared a space barely 700 square feet, with my bedroom being a converted closet where I could touch both walls when I stretched out my arms. My savings evaporated faster than morning dew. Rent, food, transportation, everything cost more than I'd anticipated. Within 3 weeks, I was searching for any job that would have me. Mornings, I worked at a deli near Wall Street, serving coffee and bagels to financial professionals who never made eye contact. Afternoons, I delivered packages for a local courier service, learning the grid of Manhattan streets by foot and bicycle. Evenings and weekends, I washed dishes at a restaurant in the East Village, coming home with pruned fingers and aching feet, clothes reeking of kitchen grease. "You're killing yourself, man," Tyler observed one night as I collapsed on our threadbare couch at 2 in the morning. "When do you even sleep?" "I'll sleep when I'm successful," I replied, only half joking. Despite the grueling schedule, I set aside 15% of every paycheck. My parents had taught me financial discipline, and even in my exhaustion, I honored their lessons. After 6 months of triple shifts and instant ramen dinners, I had saved enough to enroll in night classes at a community college, studying business and computer programming. My routine became even more punishing. Work, class, study, sleep for 4 hours. Repeat. I lived on caffeine and determination, losing weight I couldn't afford to lose. But in those classes, surrounded by other strivers, immigrants, working parents, career changers, I found a community of people who understood the hunger to transform one's circumstances. The turning point came during my 2nd year in New York. While delivering a package to a technology incubator in the Flatiron District, I overheard 2 developers arguing about a coding problem. Having just completed a similar assignment in my programming class, I hesitantly offered a solution. One of them, a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and keen eyes, studied me curiously. "That's actually not bad. Who do you work for?" "The courier service," I said, pointing to my uniform. "And a deli, and a restaurant, depends on the time of day." He extended his hand. "Frank Delaney." "And you are?" "Victor Carter." "Well, Victor Carter, how would you like a job that only requires you to be in one place?" Frank became more than my employer. He became the mentor I desperately needed. His startup, Nexus Technologies, was developing software solutions for supply chain management. Not the most glamorous field, but one with enormous potential. He hired me as a junior developer, though my formal qualifications barely warranted the position. "I'm taking a chance on you," he said bluntly on my first day. "Don't make me regret it." I didn't. I worked harder than anyone else, arriving first, leaving last, volunteering for the projects no one wanted. I learned coding languages overnight, studied competitors obsessively, and absorbed everything Frank was willing to teach about business, technology, and navigating the startup ecosystem. For 3 years, I devoted myself to Nexus. The triple jobs became a single focus, though I kept my night classes going. My roommates changed as people moved on to better circumstances. But I stayed in that same tiny apartment, still saving rigorously, even with my improved salary. Then came the idea. While helping a client implement our software, I identified a gap in the mobile marketplace, an app that could revolutionize how small businesses managed inventory, placed orders, and tracked deliveries. The potential was enormous, but it would require significant development resources. "This could be huge," I told Frank, showing him my initial wireframes and business case. Not just an add-on to our current offerings, but something standalone that could scale nationally. Frank studied my proposal, his expression unreadable. "It's promising," he admitted, "but Nexus doesn't have the bandwidth to pursue this right now. Our investors want us focused on our core products. What if I developed it independently? Nights, weekends, my own time." He leaned back, considering. That could work. No company resources, though, and nothing from our proprietary codebase. "Agreed. Completely clean room development." Frank nodded slowly. "Then go for it. And when you're ready to pitch it, I'll make some introductions." For the next 8 months, I barely slept. My days belonged to Nexus, my nights to my app, which I called Inventory IQ. I built the prototype, refined the user experience, and developed a comprehensive business plan. When it was finally ready, Frank kept his promise, arranging meetings with potential investors. The rejections came swiftly and brutally. Too niche market, insufficient differentiation, scaling concerns, unproven developer. After the 12th rejection, I sat in a park near Union Square, questioning everything. Maybe the Hamiltons had been right. Maybe I was reaching beyond my station. Maybe some people weren't meant for success. My phone rang. "Frank, how'd it go with Artemis Ventures?" "Same as all the others," I sighed. "Thanks for trying, but I think I'm done." "One more," he said firmly. "Marathon Capital, tomorrow morning at 9. Their office on Park Avenue." "Frank, I can't keep doing this. Trust me." "One more." Marathon Capital was different. The partners actually used the prototype themselves during the meeting, asking thoughtful questions, challenging my assumptions but in a constructive way. The lead partner, Serena Matthews, particularly engaged with the vision. "We'd want some refinements to the user interface," she said as the meeting concluded. "And your marketing strategy needs work. But fundamentally, we see the value proposition. Let's talk terms." 2 weeks later, I secured $1 million in seed funding, with a roadmap to Series A if certain milestones were met. Frank took me out for a proper dinner to celebrate, the first time I'd eaten at a restaurant without wearing an apron in years. "I knew you had something special when you solved that coding problem as a delivery guy," he said, raising a glass. "Here's to proving all those other investors wrong." I raised my glass in return, but my thoughts weren't on the investors who had rejected me. They were on the family that had dismissed me. The Hamiltons wouldn't know about this victory. I hadn't contacted any of them since leaving Millfield, but someday, I promised myself, they would understand exactly what they had discounted. Inventory IQ launched 6 months later, after intense development to incorporate the refinements Marathon Capital had requested. The initial release targeted small retailers in the New York area, offering a free 30-day trial to build our user base. The response exceeded even our optimistic projections. "This is exactly what I've needed," one bodega owner told me during a site visit. "I was using a notebook and spreadsheet before. This saves me hours every week." Similar feedback poured in as we expanded to other cities. By the end of our first year, we had 20,000 active users, primarily through word-of-mouth marketing. The Series A funding round closed at $12 million, allowing us to expand the team and enhance the platform. Then, something unexpected happened. A popular technology blog featured Inventory IQ in a review of essential business tools. "The inventory management solution that finally gets it right," read the headline. The article went viral in business circles, and our user growth went parabolic. Suddenly, I was no longer chasing investors, they were chasing me. Interview requests came from technology publications and business podcasts. Inventory IQ was named one of the 20 apps transforming small business by Forbes. Our user base doubled, then doubled again. With success came new challenges. Larger competitors took notice, with some attempting to replicate our features. We countered by accelerating our development roadmap, introducing new capabilities that maintained our competitive edge. I hired aggressively, building a team of developers and business professionals who shared my vision. Frank remained a trusted advisor, though he stayed with Nexus Technologies. "You've outgrown my mentorship," he told me with evident pride. "But never forget where you started." 3 years after launch, Inventory IQ had expanded beyond inventory management to become a comprehensive business operations platform. We served over 200,000 businesses across North America, with plans for international expansion. Our revenue exceeded $30 million annually, with healthy profit margins. The acquisition offers began arriving. Tech giants wanted to incorporate our technology into their ecosystems. I declined the first several, focusing instead on our growth trajectory. But when Digital Frontier, one of the world's largest enterprise software companies, approached with an offer of $400 million, the decision became more complicated. "You need to consider it seriously," advised Serena from Marathon Capital. "This is a life-changing exit." "It's not about the money," I insisted. "It's about the vision. We're just getting started." "Then negotiate for autonomy. Make sure you retain control of the product direction and your team." The negotiations lasted 2 months. The final agreement, $450 million with 25% in Digital Frontier stock, operational independence for Inventory IQ as a subsidiary, and my continued leadership for a minimum of 3 years. Critically, I retained the rights to develop new products independently after the integration period. At 30 years old, I became wealthy beyond my childhood imagination. After taxes and investor payouts, my personal share amounted to just over $100 million. The financial security was surreal, but the validation meant more. I had built something valuable, something that mattered to hundreds of thousands of businesses. I moved from my Brooklyn apartment to a penthouse in Tribeca, though the transition felt strange after years of frugality. I invested conservatively, establishing financial security that could weather any economic downturn. But more importantly, I began planning my next ventures. Digital real estate particularly interested me. Commercial properties in emerging tech hubs offered both investment potential and opportunities to support entrepreneurial ecosystems like the one that had nurtured me. I established Carter Ventures to manage these investments, focusing initially on properties in Austin, Nashville, and Seattle. Then I saw the listing, the Hamilton Tower, a luxury residential building being developed in downtown Millfield. The irony of the name struck me immediately. Millfield had changed in the years since I'd left, transforming from a sleepy Midwestern town to a growing hub for healthcare and light manufacturing. Property values had risen accordingly. The asking price was steep, $30 million, but the projected returns were solid. More compelling was the symbolism, a Carter owning the Hamilton Tower in the town where that distinction had once meant everything. I made an offer through a holding company, keeping my identity private. After brief negotiations, the property became mine, including the penthouse occupying the top 2 floors. The developer agreed to complete construction to my specifications, with a targeted completion date 18 months out. Throughout this period of rapid success and expansion, I maintained minimal contact with my family. Occasionally, I would search for news from Millfield, learning bits and pieces about the Hamiltons. Grandfather William remained the family patriarch, though his health was reportedly declining. Jackson had taken a position with the family's investment firm, presumably being groomed to eventually take over. The family fortune had weathered the economic downturns, their status in Millfield seemingly untouched. I considered reaching out many times, especially to my grandmother, who had always been kinder than the others, if still constrained by family expectations. But each time, memories of their collective rejection held me back. What would be the point? To prove my worth to people who should have valued me regardless of my success? Then came the news that changed everything. William Hamilton had passed away at the age of 84. The obituary detailed his business accomplishments, community leadership, and surviving family members. The funeral and memorial service would be held the following weekend. As I stared at the notice on my computer screen, conflicting emotions surged through me. Grandfather had never been openly cruel, but his passive acceptance of how I was treated had enabled the family's behavior. Still, his death marked the end of an era for the Hamiltons, and despite everything, he was my grandfather. The Hamilton Tower had just been completed, including my penthouse, though I hadn't yet visited in person. The timing seemed almost orchestrated by fate. After 8 years away, it was time to return to Millfield. The flight from LaGuardia to Millfield Regional Airport took just under 2 hours, but it felt like traveling back in time. As the small commercial jet began its descent, I gazed out the window at the familiar landscape, the winding river, the industrial district to the east, the rolling hills that cradled the town. Everything looked both exactly the same and completely different. I had arranged for a car service to meet me at the airport, the driver holding a sign for Mr. Carter rather than making my presence immediately known. The sleek black Audi slipped through the streets of Millfield, passing landmarks from my youth now interspersed with new development, craft coffee shops, boutique stores, and tech-focused businesses that hadn't existed when I left. "First time in Millfield?" the driver asked conversationally. "No," I replied, watching a group of teenagers exit the cinema, where I'd once worked selling popcorn. "I grew up here." "Welcome back then. Town's changed a lot in recent years. A lot of investment coming in. Including mine," I thought, but didn't say. I had booked a suite at the Hamilton Tower under an alias, instructing management to maintain discretion regarding the owner's presence. The building stood proudly in what had once been an underdeveloped area downtown, 20 stories of glass and steel that reflected the afternoon Sunday. Seeing my investment in person for the first time was surreal, from the meticulously landscaped entrance to the modern lobby, with its marble floors and custom lighting. Everything exceeded my expectations. The property manager, Joseph Klein, greeted me personally, unaware that he was addressing the owner rather than just a VIP guest. "Everything is prepared, according to your specifications, Mr. Carter," he assured me, escorting me to the private elevator. "If you need anything at all during your stay, don't hesitate to contact me directly." The penthouse took my breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Millfield and the surrounding countryside. The interior, designed by a firm I'd hired from Chicago, struck the perfect balance between luxury and comfort. This wasn't just an investment property, it was a statement. After settling in, I changed into a suit for the memorial service, opting for understated elegance rather than ostentatious display. The car service returned to transport me to the Hamilton estate, where the family had gathered to honor William's memory. The grounds were exactly as I remembered. Manicured lawns, ancient oak trees, the colonial-style mansion that had intimidated me as a child. Cars lined the circular driveway, mostly luxury brands with local plates. The Hamiltons and their social circle gathered to bid farewell to their patriarch. My heart pounded as I approached the entrance. A staff member I didn't recognize checked my name against the guest list. "Victor Carter," I said quietly. He scanned the list, then looked up with mild surprise. "Yes, sir. The family is gathered in the main hall. Please go right in." The foyer opened into the grand hall where dozens of people stood in somber clusters, speaking in hushed tones. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light over the assembled guests, many of whom I recognized despite the passing years. Family portraits lined the walls, generations of Hamiltons staring down with the same proud bearing. I moved through the space unnoticed at first, observing the dynamics. Grandmother Eleanor sat regally in a wingback chair near the fireplace, accepting condolences with dignified grace. Uncle Robert and Aunt Diana circulated among the guests, playing their roles as the new senior members of the family. Various cousins, including Amanda, stood in small groups with their spouses and older children. Then I spotted Jackson, holding court near the bar, a glass of scotch in hand. At 34, he had maintained his athletic build, though his hairline had receded slightly. His tailored suit and gold watch screamed of wealth and privilege, as did his loud, confident voice carrying across the room. Aunt Diana saw me first. Her eyes widened, champagne flute freezing halfway to her lips. She nudged Uncle Robert, whose head swiveled in my direction, expression morphing from confusion to recognition to something approaching alarm. Like ripples in a pond, awareness of my presence spread through the gathering. Conversations halted mid-sentence, heads turned. Jackson, noticing the shift in attention, followed the collective gaze until his eyes locked with mine. "Victor?" he exclaimed, loud enough to silence the remaining conversations. "Well, this is unexpected." He approached with the exaggerated warmth of someone performing for an audience, arms outstretched as if for an embrace I had no intention of receiving. "Cousin," I acknowledged, stepping back slightly. "I came to pay my respects to grandfather." Of course," he said, dropping his arms awkwardly. "It's been what, 8 years? 9? 8. And what brings you back besides the obvious? Still fixing cars like your old man?" The casual cruelty, the dismissive reference to my father's honest work, confirmed that nothing fundamental had changed with Jackson. "I'm in technology now," I said simply. "Based in New York." "Technology," he repeated with a smirk. "Sounds nebulous. It support? Retail?" Before I could respond, Grandmother Eleanor's voice cut through the tension. "Victor, come here, child." She had risen from her chair, leaning slightly on a cane I hadn't noticed before. I crossed to her, aware of all eyes tracking my movement. "Grandmother," I said, taking her outstretched hands. They felt fragile, the skin tissue-thin over prominent veins. "You look so much like your mother," she said, studying my face. "She would be proud of the man you've become." Something in her tone suggested she knew more about my circumstances than the others. I wondered fleetingly if she had been keeping tabs on me over the years. "Thank you for coming," she continued. "William would have appreciated it, despite everything." The memorial service itself was formal and restrained, befitting William Hamilton's public persona. Various business associates and community leaders offered remembrances that painted him as a visionary entrepreneur and generous philanthropist. Family members spoke of his wisdom and guidance. None mentioned his complicated relationship with my mother or his indifference toward his grandson who had left town under difficult circumstances. Throughout the service, I could feel Jackson watching me, his expression calculating. When the formal proceedings concluded, he approached again, this time with Uncle Robert in tow. "We're continuing the gathering at my new place," he announced, clearly expecting me to be impressed. "The penthouse at Hamilton Tower. Very exclusive. You should join us." The irony was almost too perfect. I struggled to keep my expression neutral. "The Hamilton Tower," I repeated. "Interesting choice. Only the best for a Hamilton," Jackson preened. "Top 2 floors, private elevator access, the works. Just closed on it last month. You should see the view of our little town." Uncle Robert interjected, his tone carefully modulated. "Your grandmother will be joining us, of course, and it would be appropriate for you to attend as well. Family unity and all that." I understood the subtext. My presence was unexpected, but now public knowledge. The Hamiltons needed to maintain appearances, to show the community they were a united family in grief. My absence from the continued memorial would raise questions they preferred not to answer. "I wouldn't miss it," I replied. 2 hours later, a procession of luxury vehicles pulled into the circular drive of the Hamilton Tower. I had arrived separately, already waiting in the lobby as the family approached the entrance. Jackson led the group, speaking animatedly to Uncle Robert, while gesturing at various architectural features of the building. Premium materials throughout, security system that recognizes residents automatically, and wait until you see the rooftop garden, he was saying as they entered the lobby. The developer spared no expense. He faltered momentarily upon seeing me waiting by the private elevator, but quickly recovered. "Victor, glad you found the place," he called out. "Though you're a bit early, we were going to have drinks at the bar first." He gestured toward the upscale lounge off the main lobby. "I thought I'd familiarize myself with the building," I replied. "Not much to see from the public areas," Jackson said dismissively. "The real luxury is upstairs." The family and closest friends, about 20 people in total, gathered in the lobby. Grandmother Eleanor arrived last, assisted by a nurse who helped her from a town car. As the group consolidated, Jackson assumed a position of authority, pressing the call button for the private elevator. "This elevator only serves the penthouse levels," he explained loudly. "Playing tour guide, biometric security, restricted access. Very exclusive." The elevator arrived with a soft chime, doors sliding open to reveal the marble-lined interior. Jackson gestured grandly for Grandmother Eleanor to enter first, followed by his parents. As the group began filing in, Jackson's eyes fell on me again, his expression souring. "Who let him in?" he said loudly, clearly intending to be overheard. "He's like mold, keeps coming back." The group fell silent, shocked by the open hostility. Grandmother Eleanor turned, her expression darkening. "Jackson, that's enough," she said sharply. "No, Grandmother, it's not enough," he continued, emboldened by alcohol and a sense of territorial ownership. "He disappears for 8 years, contributes nothing to the family, and shows up now? Probably looking for a handout now that grandfather's gone." I remained silent, watching this display with a curious detachment. In moments, everything would change. The elevator had grown crowded. Jackson positioned himself at the control panel, preparing to send the group upstairs. "Security," he called to a uniformed man near the reception desk. "We seem to have an unwelcome visitor. Could you escort my cousin out, please?" The security officer approached quickly, but not with the response Jackson anticipated. The man looked at me with immediate recognition. "Mr. Carter, is everything all right, sir?" he asked respectfully. Jackson's expression froze in confusion. There must be some mistake. This man shouldn't be allowed up to my penthouse. The security officer looked uncomfortable. "Sir, this is Mr. Carter. He's the owner." "Owner of what?" Jackson demanded. "The building, sir. Hamilton Tower belongs to Mr. Carter." The silence that followed was absolute. Jackson's mouth opened and closed without producing sound, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and the dawning realization that he had just publicly insulted the owner of the building he had been bragging about. "There's clearly been a misunderstanding," Uncle Robert interjected, his businessman instincts kicking in. "My son recently purchased the penthouse unit." "No, sir," the security officer said firmly. "Mr. Jackson Hamilton leased the penthouse from Carter Holdings. Mr. Victor Carter is the sole owner of the entire property." All eyes turned to me. I allowed myself a small smile, savoring the moment I had imagined countless times over the years. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation upstairs," I suggested calmly. "In my penthouse." Jackson found his voice, though it emerged as an undignified sputter. "This is impossible. You can't afford. You were a nobody when you left." "Things change, Jackson," I replied. "People change too. Well, some people." The elevator ride was excruciating for everyone except me. 20 people crammed into the space, yet somehow a chasm existed between me and the family that had dismissed me. Grandmother Eleanor studied me with new eyes, while Uncle Robert and Aunt Diana exchanged frantic whispers. Jackson stood rigidly in the corner, knuckles white as he gripped the railing. The doors opened directly into the penthouse foyer, revealing the spectacular space I had created. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the lights of Millfield spreading below us. Custom furnishings, original artwork, and subtle technology integrated throughout spoke of tasteful wealth rather than ostentatious display. "Welcome," I said, stepping out first. "Please, make yourselves comfortable." The group moved into the main living area like sleepwalkers, stunned by both the revelation of my ownership and the undeniable luxury of the space. Staff I had arranged for the evening appeared with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres, further cementing the reality of the situation. Jackson broke from the group, approaching me with barely contained fury. "What kind of game are you playing?" he hissed, keeping his voice low enough that others couldn't hear. "No game, Jackson. Just business. You expect me to believe that you, the son of a mechanic, somehow bought a $30 million building? What did you do? Win the lottery?" "I built a company," I replied evenly. "A successful one." "Bullshit. This is some kind of con. You probably scammed some investors, and when they find out, Digital Frontier acquired my company for $450 million last year," I interrupted, watching his eyes widen. "The transaction is public record if you'd care to look it up. Inventory IQ. I founded it, built it, and sold it while maintaining operational control." He staggered slightly, as if physically struck. 400 million? "And 50, I added, unnecessarily, admittedly enjoying his discomfort. "That's not possible. You were nothing when you left here." "I was never nothing, Jackson. That was just how you chose to see me." He rallied, anger replacing shock. "So this is your revenge? Buying this building, letting me think I was getting the penthouse, just to humiliate me?" "I bought this building as an investment," I clarified. "The fact that you chose to lease the penthouse without researching the ownership was your decision, not mine. Though I won't pretend the irony isn't satisfying." Across the room, Uncle Robert was intensely questioning the property manager, who had arrived moments after we entered. I could see the realization spreading across his features as Joseph Klein confirmed what the security officer had said. "So what now?" Jackson demanded. "You throw us out? Show everyone how powerful you've become?" "Now," I said, taking a champagne flute from a passing server, "we honor grandfather's memory, as families should. Tomorrow is soon enough to discuss business matters." I stepped away, moving toward Grandmother Eleanor, who sat watching the proceedings with an inscrutable expression. As I approached, she patted the space beside her on the sofa. "You've been busy, Victor," she said, her voice carrying the slight tremor of age, but still sharp with intelligence. "Life doesn't stop when you leave Millfield," I replied, taking the offered seat. "Indeed." She studied me closely. "William knew. You know." "Knew what?" "About your success. He had his sources on Wall Street. When your company was acquired, he had the article framed. This revelation caught me off guard. He never contacted me." "Pride," she said simply. "His, not yours. He was wrong about so many things, including you." She reached for my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. I should have done more, said more. Before I could respond, Uncle Robert approached, his expression a forced mask of congeniality. "Victor, might I have a word?" he asked, then noticed my grandmother. "Excuse us, Mother." "No," she said firmly. "Whatever you have to say to Victor, you can say in front of me." Uncle Robert's smile tightened. "Very well. Victor, there seems to be some confusion about Jackson's lease agreement. He was under the impression he was purchasing the penthouse unit. The terms were clearly outlined in the contract he signed, I replied. A 3-year lease, with option to renew, not a purchase. Carter Holdings doesn't sell individual units in this property. Yes, well, perhaps we could discuss a potential amendment to those terms? Given the family connection, a more favorable arrangement might be appropriate. The audacity was breathtaking. After years of exclusion and dismissal, he was attempting to leverage our relationship for financial gain, without so much as an acknowledgement of their past treatment. I'm afraid that won't be possible, I said. Carter Holdings maintains strict policies about property transactions. I see. His jaw tightened. And may I ask what your intentions are regarding the family interests more broadly? William's estate is being settled, and there are significant holdings to consider. I have no claim on grandfather's estate, if that's your concern. My interest in Millfield is strictly business. This seemed to relieve him, though his suspicion remained evident. You've done well for yourself, clearly. Perhaps there's an opportunity for collaboration. Hamilton Investments has extensive experience in property development. Thank you for the offer, I said, rising to signal the end of the conversation. But my portfolio is well managed as it stands. As Uncle Robert retreated, I noticed Jackson in heated conversation with Joseph Klein, gesturing angrily toward me. The property manager maintained his professional composure, but it was clear Jackson was making demands that couldn't be accommodated. Throughout the remainder of the evening, the family members cycled through various responses to the revelation. Some, like Amanda and a few cousins, approached with seemingly genuine interest in my life and career. Others maintained a careful distance, processing the dramatic reversal of fortune. Jackson alternated between sullen silence and bursts of defensive bragging about his own accomplishments at Hamilton Investments. As the gathering began to wind down, I found myself alone on the terrace, gazing out at the town that had once defined the boundaries of my existence. The cool night air carried the scent of approaching autumn, a crispness that felt cleansing after the emotionally charged evening. The glass door slid open behind me. Jackson stepped onto the terrace, unsteady from too much scotch, but with determination in his eyes. "You think you've won, don't you?" he said without preamble. "This isn't a competition, Jackson." "Everything's a competition," he insisted, "always has been. And you coming back here, buying this building out from under me, showing off your millions. You're trying to prove something." I turned to face him fully. "The only thing I've proven is that your assessment of me was wrong. I didn't need the Hamilton name or fortune to succeed." "So righteous," he sneered. "Saint Victor, rising from nothing through hard work and determination. You know what I think? I think you got lucky. Right place, right time, right idea. But luck runs out, cousin." "Is that what you tell yourself about your position at the family firm?" I asked. "That it's based on merit rather than your last name?" His face flushed. "I've earned everything I have." "Perhaps you have," I conceded. "In which case, you'll continue to succeed regardless of whether you live in this particular penthouse." "You're evicting me." It wasn't a question. "No. Your lease is valid, and I honor my contracts. But after tonight, I think we both know you won't want to stay." He laughed bitterly. "Because I can't stand the thought of paying rent to Victor Carter? Is that what you think? Because every time you enter this building, every time you ride that private elevator, every time you look out these windows at the town your family has always considered its domain, you'll be reminded that things have changed. The name Hamilton doesn't automatically open doors anymore. At least, not all of them." He stepped closer, anger rolling off him in palpable waves. For a moment, I thought he might actually strike me. "This isn't over," he said through clenched teeth. "You may have your fancy building and your tech millions, but this is still Hamilton territory. You're still an outsider. I'm not trying to take anything from you, Jackson. I never was. That was always your fear, not my ambition." He turned abruptly, stalking back toward the door. "Enjoy your victory lap, Victor. But remember, fortunes change. Today's success story is tomorrow's cautionary tale." As the door slid closed behind him, I turned back to the view of Millfield, letting the encounter settle. Jackson's reaction was predictable, rooted in the same insecurity that had fueled his behavior since childhood. What I hadn't predicted was how hollow the confrontation would feel. Years of imagining this moment, of fantasizing about the perfect rejoinder to their dismissal of me, and now that it had arrived, I found myself feeling not triumph, but a strange sense of emptiness. The revenge I had unconsciously sought wasn't satisfying in the way I had expected. As the last guests departed, Grandmother Eleanor insisted on being the final one to leave. Her nurse waited patiently by the elevator as she took my hands in hers. "Will you come see me tomorrow?" she asked. "There are things we should discuss, family matters that shouldn't wait." I hesitated, then nodded. "I'll come in the morning." She squeezed my hands gently. William was proud of you, in his way. Too proud to admit his mistakes, but proud nonetheless. As the elevator doors closed behind her, I stood alone in the penthouse that symbolized both my success and my lingering connection to a past I had tried to escape. The confrontation was over, but its aftermath was just beginning. Morning brought a barrage of text messages and missed calls on my phone. Word had spread rapidly through the Hamilton family network about my return and unexpected status. Some messages expressed shock, others congratulations, and a few transparent attempts to establish connections that might prove advantageous. Jackson had already publicly announced his intention to terminate his lease and find more suitable accommodations elsewhere in Millfield. His social media post framed it as his decision, based on discovering concerning business practices by the building's ownership. The transparent attempt to save face might have bothered me once. Now it seemed merely sad. I had breakfast delivered to the penthouse, Tuloda. Locally sourced ingredients prepared by the building's private chef, another amenity Jackson had undoubtedly boasted about without appreciating the irony. As I ate, I scrolled through more messages, pausing at one from Frank. "How's the homecoming going? Ready to return to civilization yet?" I smiled, typing a brief response. "More dramatic than expected. We'll fill you in when I'm back." The meeting with Grandmother Eleanor couldn't be postponed, so I dressed casually but well and drove the short distance to her home, a smaller but elegant residence separate from the main Hamilton estate. She had moved there after Grandfather's retirement, preferring its manageable size and proximity to downtown. Her nurse, Angela, greeted me at the door. "She's been waiting for you," she said, leading me to a sunroom at the back of the house. She didn't sleep much last night. Grandmother sat in a wicker chair, surrounded by flowering plants, morning light streaming through large windows. Despite her age and the emotional events of the previous day, she looked composed and alert. "Victor," she said warmly, extending her hand. "Thank you for coming." I took the offered seat across from her. "You said we needed to talk. Direct, like your mother." She smiled faintly. "Yes, we do. About William's will, among other things. I already told Uncle Robert I don't expect anything from the estate. That's not why I asked you here." She reached for a folder on the side table. "William made changes to his will 6 months ago, after learning about your company's acquisition. He didn't tell the family." She handed me the folder. Inside was a copy of a will amendment, with several paragraphs highlighted. I skimmed the legal language, then stopped at a section that mentioned my name specifically. "He left me his vintage car collection?" I said incredulously. Grandmother nodded. "And his personal library. He knew your father had taught you about cars, and that your mother had instilled her love of reading in you. It was his way of acknowledging that connection, I think." The gesture was unexpected and strangely moving. Grandfather's car collection was substantial and valuable, classic American models from the 50s and 60s that he had restored and maintained meticulously. His library contained first editions and rare volumes collected over a lifetime. "There's more," she continued. "He established a trust in your parents' names, dedicated to providing scholarships for trade school education. He specified that you should serve on the board that administers it." I stared at the document, trying to reconcile this information with the grandfather I had known, or thought I knew. "Why didn't he reach out to me directly?" I asked finally. "Pride," she repeated her answer from the previous night. "And shame, I think. William was not a man who admitted mistakes easily. By the time he recognized his error in judgment regarding you, too many years had passed. He convinced himself it was better to make this gesture in his will than to risk rejection if he contacted you. And the rest of the family? Do they know about these provisions?" "Not yet. The formal reading of the will is scheduled for tomorrow. Robert expects to be named executor of everything. He'll be surprised." The understatement made me smile despite myself. I imagine he will. She leaned forward, her expression earnest. But Victor, I didn't ask you here just to prepare you for tomorrow's revelation. I wanted to apologize. For myself and for our family. We treated you and your parents shamefully. There's no excuse for it. You were always kind to me, I said, remembering small acts of grandmotherly affection, cookies saved from family functions, birthday cards with modest checks, whispered encouragements when no one else was listening. Kindness without courage is nearly worthless, she replied firmly. I should have stood up to William and Robert years ago, should have insisted they recognize your parents' marriage and your place in this family. Instead, I made small gestures and told myself it was enough. Her honesty was disarming. Thank you for saying that. I don't seek forgiveness, Victor. Some things shouldn't be easily forgiven. But I hope you'll consider maintaining contact now that you've returned to Millfield, however temporarily. I'd like to know my grandson while I still can. The sincerity in her voice touched something in me that I had thought long buried, a desire for family connection that had survived despite years of rejection. I'd like that, I said simply. The conversation shifted to lighter topics. My life in New York, my company, her daily routines and interests. By the time I left, 2 hours had passed, and a tentative bridge had been established across the chasm of our shared history. The formal reading of the will the following day was every bit as dramatic as grandmother had suggested it might be. Gathered in the conference room of Hamilton Investments' downtown office, the family listened as the family attorney, Martin Weiss, methodically worked through the document. As expected, Uncle Robert was named executor of the main estate and business interests. Various properties, investments, and personal items were distributed among family members. Jackson received a significant portfolio of stocks and bonds, along with the family's lake house. Everything proceeded according to expectations until Martin reached the amendments. To my grandson, Victor James Carter, I leave my entire collection of automobiles, housed in the garage at Hamilton Estate, along with my personal library and all its contents. Martin read, his professional demeanor never wavering, despite the gasps and murmurs that erupted around the table. Uncle Robert's face flushed dark red. There must be some mistake. That collection is worth millions. There is no mistake, Martin confirmed. The amendment is properly executed and witnessed. He continued reading, detailing the scholarship trust and my role in its administration. With each revelation, the atmosphere in the room grew more tense. Jackson stared at me with naked hostility, while others in the family appeared simply confused by this unexpected turn. When the reading concluded, people broke into small groups, discussing the implications in hushed voices. Uncle Robert cornered Martin near the door, their conversation intense but inaudible from where I sat. Amanda approached my chair, her expression thoughtful. Grandfather must have really respected what you've accomplished, she said. I do too, for what it's worth. Building something from nothing that takes real talent. Her acknowledgement seemed genuine, without the calculation evident in some of the other overtures I'd received. Thank you, I said. How's medical school going? Grandmother mentioned you're specializing in pediatric oncology. Surprise flickered across her face. You knew about that? I might have been gone, but I didn't forget I had family here. Our conversation was interrupted by Jackson, who had broken away from a huddle with his parents. This is a travesty, he announced loudly, addressing the room at large but looking directly at me. Victor abandoned this family for 8 years, contributed nothing, and now swoops in to collect valuable assets that should remain with those who actually cared about grandfather. The room fell silent, all eyes shifting between us. Jackson, that's enough, Grandmother Eleanor said sharply from her seat near the head of the table. No, it's not nearly enough, he insisted. I'm going to contest this amendment. It was clearly made when grandfather's health was failing, when he wasn't thinking clearly. Martin Weiss cleared his throat. I can attest that William was of sound mind when he made these changes. The amendment will withstand legal challenge. We'll see about that, Jackson snapped. I rose from my chair, suddenly weary of the drama. The cars and books aren't why I came back, Jackson. They weren't why I built my company or bought the building. Contrary to what you seem to believe, my life hasn't revolved around the Hamiltons since I left. Yet here you are, he countered, collecting your prize. Here I am, I agreed, honoring my grandfather's memory and his wishes, whether I understand them fully or not. I turned to Martin. I'd like to donate the entire car collection to the Millfield Automotive Museum under the condition that they establish a youth apprenticeship program in James Carter's name. My father would have wanted these classics to be appreciated by people who truly love cars. The announcement created another stir. Uncle Robert looked dumbfounded, while grandmother smiled approvingly. As for the library, I continued, I'll accept that bequest with gratitude. Those books meant something to grandfather, and they'll mean something to me as well. Jackson's triumphant expression at my giving up the cars faltered when he realized I wasn't relinquishing the books as well. The collection's worth $500,000 at least, he protested. Then its value will be a daily reminder of what grandfather wanted me to have, I replied evenly. Just as your position at this firm is a daily reminder of what he wanted for you. In the days that followed, the practical matters of executing grandfather's wishes kept me in Millfield longer than I had initially planned. The car donation required paperwork and coordination with the museum. The library needed to be cataloged and arrangements made for shipping select volumes to my New York residence. The scholarship trust required organizational meetings and structure. Throughout this period, various family members made overtures of reconciliation or connection. Some seemed genuine in their desire to know me better, now that circumstances had forced them to see me in a new light. Others were transparently opportunistic, suddenly interested in my business acumen or investment strategies. I established boundaries, accepting some invitations while declining others. Grandmother Eleanor became a regular part of my days. Our morning conversations a peaceful counterpoint to the legal and logistical complexities that filled my afternoons. Jackson maintained his hostile stance, publicly proceeding with his threat to contest the will while privately spreading rumors about how I had manipulated grandfather in his final months. The legal challenge went nowhere, dismissed by the court for lack of standing. His professional reputation began to suffer as clients questioned his judgment and temperament. 2 months into what had intended to be a weekend visit, I made a decision. The Hamilton Tower penthouse would become my second residence rather than purely an investment property. New York remained my primary home, but maintaining a presence in Millfield felt increasingly important, not to prove anything to the Hamiltons, but to reconnect with the community my parents had valued. I established a local branch of Carter Ventures, focusing on developing properties that would benefit the town's growth while preserving its character. I hired locally, creating jobs and opportunity. When the local community college needed funding for a technology program, I established a grant in my mother's name. Gradually, I built relationships in Millfield that had nothing to do with the Hamilton name. I reconnected with old teachers, with the neighbors who had been kind to my parents, with the community that existed beyond the narrow confines of family status. Jackson's downward spiral continued. His challenge to the will having failed, he turned his resentment toward the family firm, making increasingly risky investment decisions that Uncle Robert was forced to override. Their relationship deteriorated, culminating in Jackson's dismissal from Hamilton Investments. He left Millfield shortly after, relocating to Chicago with vague plans to establish his own firm. Occasional reports filtered back, suggesting limited success and continued personal struggles. I felt no satisfaction in his difficulties, only a sense that patterns established in childhood were playing out to their natural conclusion. With Jackson gone, other family relationships had space to evolve. Amanda completed her medical residency and returned to establish a pediatric practice in Millfield. We developed a genuine friendship, the cousins we might have been in a different reality. Uncle Robert maintained a formal but respectful distance, while Aunt Diana made awkward but seemingly sincere efforts to include me in family gatherings. Through it all, I maintained the perspective that had sustained me during my years in New York. My worth wasn't determined by the Hamilton name or fortune, but by the life I built and the values I upheld. The difference now was that I no longer needed to prove this to anyone, least of all myself. The journey from the wounded 19-year-old who fled Millfield to the man who returned 8 years later was measured not just in professional achievements or financial success, but in emotional growth. Standing on the rooftop garden of Hamilton Tower 3 years after my return, watching the sunset paint the town in golden light, I reflected on the unexpected path my life had taken. Success had come, beyond anything I could have imagined when I boarded that bus to New York. Inventory IQ continued to thrive under my leadership within the digital frontier ecosystem. Carter Ventures had expanded its portfolio across multiple cities. My net worth had grown to the point where financial concerns would never again dictate my choices. Yet the true richness of my life came from elsewhere. The hollow victory of that first confrontation with Jackson had taught me something crucial. Revenge, even when justified, doesn't heal wounds. It merely covers them temporarily, like expensive clothing over an injury that still needs treatment. The real healing began with Grandmother Eleanor's honest acknowledgement of the past. Her willingness to take responsibility, without excuses or deflection, created space for authentic reconciliation. Our relationship deepened over those 3 years, my regular visits to her home becoming anchors in my increasingly bi-coastal life. "You know what I regret most?" she asked during one such visit, as we sat reviewing family photographs she had preserved. "Not seeing the strength you inherited from both sides of your family. Your father's resilience and your mother's determination. The very qualities that made your success possible were right in front of us, if we had only been willing to see." Therapy helped too, though I resisted it initially. "I'm fine," I told Frank during a business trip to New York, shortly after the will reading. "The family drama is settled. I'm moving forward." "You're functional," he corrected, with the bluntness that characterized our relationship. "That's different from being healed. Trust me on this, Victor. Success doesn't automatically resolve emotional trauma. Sometimes it just gives you better ways to avoid dealing with it." He was right, of course. The therapist I eventually consulted helped me recognize how deeply the family's rejection had shaped my decisions and self-perception, creating patterns I wasn't fully conscious of. The drive that propelled me to success was healthy in many ways, but it contained elements of desperation to prove my worth that could become destructive if left unexamined. "Healing isn't about forgetting, or even necessarily forgiving," Dr. Levine explained during one particularly insightful session. "It's about integrating these experiences into your life story without letting them control your future choices. It's about recognizing that while you can't change what happened, you can change how it affects you going forward." This perspective helped me approach relationships with the remaining Hamilton family members with greater clarity and boundaries. I could maintain connections with those who demonstrated genuine respect and care, like Grandmother Eleanor and Amanda, while limiting interaction with those whose patterns remained unchanged. More importantly, I learned to build a chosen family that supported and challenged me in healthy ways. Frank remained a mentor and friend, flying out to Millfield occasionally to help with the local tech initiative. My roommates from those early New York days, Damon, Jesse, and Tyler, remained part of my life, each having found their own paths to success that had nothing to do with family names or inherited privilege. And then there was Maya. We met during the Community College Technology Program launch, where she served as the curriculum director. Her intelligence and direct manner caught my attention immediately, but it was her complete disinterest in my financial status that intrigued me most. "So, you're the tech millionaire who bought Hamilton Tower," she said after we were introduced. "That's nice. Now, about this coding framework you're proposing for the introductory course." She knew Millfield well, having grown up in a neighboring town, but had none of the reverence for the Hamilton name that characterized so many local interactions. When I finally asked her to dinner, 3 meetings into the program development, she agreed with a caveat. "Just to be clear," she said, "I'm saying yes because you have interesting ideas about educational access, not because you own a building." Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and shared values rather than the intensity of physical attraction or social compatibility. 6 months in, she confessed that she had researched me thoroughly before agreeing to that first date. "I needed to know if you were just another rich guy playing philanthropist for the tax breaks," she explained. "I found articles about you from before the acquisition. The work you did with small businesses, the way you built your company, that told me more about who you are than the number of zeros in your bank account." Her perspective helped ground me when the trappings of wealth threatened to create distance between me and the community I was trying to reconnect with. Together, we established additional programs beyond the tech initiative: arts education in underserved schools, small business incubators for local entrepreneurs, housing assistance for elderly residents on fixed incomes. Wealth and influence became tools for community building rather than status symbols. I renovated my childhood neighborhood rather than tearing it down for new development, preserving the character that had shaped my early years while improving infrastructure and amenities. The most profound healing, however, came through forgiveness, not of others but of myself. For years, I had carried a buried sense of shame, a subconscious belief that the family's rejection must have been somehow deserved. Success had masked this belief, but never fully eradicated it. "You were a child," Dr. Levine reminded me repeatedly. "Their behavior reflected their limitations, not your worth." Gradually, I internalized this truth. The weight of proving myself worthy of acceptance lifted, replaced by the understanding that true worth comes from how we treat others, the values we uphold, and the communities we build. This lesson shaped my approach to the ongoing relationship with the Hamilton family. When Uncle Robert's health declined and Hamilton Investments faced leadership challenges, I offered assistance without conditions or expectations. Not to prove anything, but because it was the right thing to do for the employees whose livelihoods depended on the company's stability. Grandmother Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep 2 years after my return, having lived long enough to see genuine healing begin within the family. At her memorial service, I spoke about her courage in acknowledging past mistakes and her wisdom in showing that it's never too late to repair broken relationships. The family listened with respect, Jackson notably absent by his own choice. The library grandfather left me became a source of unexpected connection to him. Among the rare volumes and first editions, I discovered his personal journals, dating back to his early business days. The entries revealed a more complex man than I had known, ambitious and sometimes harsh, but also thoughtful and occasionally plagued by regrets about family matters. One entry, dated shortly after my parents' death, particularly affected me. "Elizabeth's boy left town today. Robert says good riddance, but I wonder if we've failed the boy as much as I failed his mother. Success and family shouldn't be mutually exclusive, yet I've somehow made them so." These glimpses into his private thoughts didn't excuse the pain his actions had caused, but they offered perspective that helped me move toward peace with his memory. The complicated truth was that he had been both the man who allowed my exclusion from the family and the man who ultimately acknowledged my achievements in his will. Life isn't about perfect resolution or complete closure. It's about learning to carry our histories without being defined by them, about building new stories atop the foundations of the old. Today, standing on this rooftop garden overlooking Millfield, I understand that my return wasn't about revenge or validation. It was about reclaiming part of myself that I had left behind when I fled 8 years earlier. Not the pain or rejection, but the connection to place and history that helps shape identity. The Hamilton name still carries weight in this town, but now the Carter name does as well, associated with innovation, opportunity, and community investment rather than family drama or social standing. The true victory wasn't in showing the Hamiltons what they had dismissed, but in demonstrating to myself that I could return whole and healed, able to engage with the past without being consumed by it. My father's words echo still. "Your worth isn't in your wallet, but in your character." He couldn't have known how his humble wisdom would sustain me through both struggle and success, becoming the foundation of a life built on authentic values rather than external validation. If you're watching this and wrestling with family rejection or the pain of being underestimated, know that your story isn't defined by others' limited perception of you. True success isn't measured by proving critics wrong, but by living according to your own values and building communities that reflect them. Have you experienced a moment when success felt hollow because it was built on the need for validation? Share your story in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that their worth exists, independent of others' recognition. Thank you for witnessing my story, and remember, the family we build by choice can be as meaningful as the one we're born into.